What is going on, guys? Jim here, and welcome back to the channel. Now, I've heard you can't turn a hoe into a housewife, but I've also heard you can turn your daily into a race car, and that's exactly what we're going to be doing today by installing this billet aluminum transmission mount by Torque Solutions onto my 2021 Subaru WRX. Oh yeah. So the first question is why? Why do we get so many questions about if I should be installing this particular mount onto my vehicle? And what I would mostly say is it has something to do with price. If you happen to be in the market to replace your transmission mount, you will notice that this Torque Solution billet aluminum mount is pretty much the cheapest one on the market, with the exception of the full rubber SPT mount, which in my opinion is also a decent upgrade. But the first thing we need to talk about is why we would want to upgrade our transmission mount as these cars kind of age, or maybe you're just interested in upping the performance of your engine mounts. You will notice that the car between shifts or under heavy acceleration, that motor and trans will rock back and forth quite violently. On top of that, once the cars kind of get some age on them, that violence seems to increase quite drastically. So replacing your transmission mount might be on your list of things to do. That's where price comes into play. We have some other very good and very well-known transmission mounts and engine mounts from companies like IAG. I worked there for 10 years. I put hundreds of those mounts onto cars, and they come very highly recommended. But once we add budget into the equation, you could pretty much buy two of these for the price of one IAG mount. And that mainly comes down to the modular factor of something like the IAG mount, where you can take it apart and replace those durometer bushings in there anywhere from I think it's like a 60 or 75, a 90, and the solid engine mounts. Unfortunately, we don't get a lot of questions about the IAG mount when it comes to our support team. It always seems to be the Torque Solutions mount. With that being said, we will be installing this on the car today as kind of like a budget-friendly upgrade and see just how wild it gets inside that car, and to see if this is an actual viable option, if you're on a budget and want to replace your transmission mount. While we're in there, we're also going to add this Whiteline Positive Shift Kit. That happens to be one of what I think is most overlooked modifications when you're doing these kind of like engine and transmission mount mods. What you may or may not know is the factory bracing system under there that holds the transmission is actually sandwiched together with 4 very soft rubber bushings. And if we're looking to get the most rigidity possible out of an upgrade such as this mount, we are going to put this positive shift kit in as well. Once again, that is going to up the noise level inside the cabin of the car, so we're going full ham with this particular race setup on my daily driver. It's also worth mentioning that Torque Solutions says on their description that a performance modification like this should better your ET times. And you know us, we certainly love to drag this car and do a whole bunch of 8th mile draggy tests, so no better person to figure out if something like this is going to actually improve your 8th mile or quarter mile times. Lastly, this installation's been covered, pretty much since the dawn of the new era of Subarus. Anything from like the GC afterwards has the same exact, transmission carrier. So we're just going to go ahead and get to work. The only thing I kind of want to touch on is when you do purchase this mount, it does say 6-speed manual transmission right there. I think you can see it. In the package, you will also get this spacer that is based for 5-speed manual transmissions. Now, although this car is a 6-speed manual, it is the case half 6-speed. So this whole transmission is basically based off the design of the 5-speed. So I do expect to use this spacer during our installation. Anyway, let's get to doing it so that I can get doing some hits and some draggies. Maybe get a little faster. We'll see. All right, gang, pretty simple. A couple of 14s, 2 12s, and 2 17s, and we've got our brace off and our factory transmission mount. Now, with everything kind of apart here, you can definitely see, with that factory mount, man, look at all this movement. Look at all this movement this thing has. And that's what we're really trying to get rid of, is all that sloppiness. And then with our solid mount, I mean, why even try? It's billet aluminum. It's not moving at all. Now, the other thing is this cross member, and this is what I was saying with that Whiteline Positive Shift Kit. This is something that gets commonly overlooked when doing upgrades like a transmission mount. I mean, if I stand on this thing, you can kind of, this thing's got a lot of movement to it, and that's because if you can see sandwiched in there, there's some rubber, and then up top here, there is rubber there, and all of that is just a recipe for things moving around. So our poly bushings in our positive shift kit is really gonna kind of stiffen that whole thing up together with our solid transmission mount. Then everything's gonna go back in the car, and we're gonna decide, was this a good idea, or should I have not turned my daily driver into a race car? But we won't know until it's all bolted up, so let's go. Oh yeah, boys, we've got our positive shift kit put in. I just kind of want to perform the same test here, and man, that is way more stiff. And that makes a whole lot of sense too, because these are the, flimsy old rubber bushings that came out. These are pathetically easy to bend, where our polyurethane bushings that are in it now are much, much more difficult. Another thing I wanted to touch on, kind of like a tech tip, is, when we're going to replace these mounts with all of this rubber stuff in here to a solid mount like this rubber actually acts as a damper for all of your hardware. So as the car is kind of like doing all the hard shifting, or even just sitting there at idle and you've got that little bit of shake from your engine and the gear inside, this rubber in there is really acting as a damper to help keep all of your hardware tight. And now, since we have gotten rid of all that, we're going to be using a dab of blue Loctite on both our bolts and our nuts, because all of that vibration, we don't want kind of, jarring a lot of this stuff coming loose in the near future. But we've got our positive shift kit in. We're ready to put our transmission mount on. Like I said, although this is a 6-speed car, it's based off of the case half 5-speed transmission, so we will be installing our 5-speed manual plate. Then we will be using all of our hardware to reinstall, then put our cradle back on. Then let's go make some hits. Well, boom, there you have it. It's done. Everything is installed on the car. Well, that was pretty simple. The Torque Solutions solid mount, readily available, so easy to get. Same thing with the Whiteline Positive Shift Kit, very easy to find, to come to your door. Number 2, the installation. The installation was fairly simple. If this is a novice to intermediate install, I would definitely agree with that, as long as you're confident enough to get your car up off the ground safely and securely on jack stands, with also having the jack under there to support just in case anything were to happen. It's relatively easy to do this job, in your garage or in your driveway with hand tools. But now we're on to the most important question that we get asked. Is it any good? Should you even buy this thing? Because, it's a solid mount, and there's going to be so much noise and so much vibration in the car that it kind of offsets the fact that it's significantly cheaper than any other real competitive mount that you would put on this thing. Just to kind of give you a recap as well, it is the only mount upgrade I have on this vehicle at this time. The engine mounts are still stock, and they got about 30,000 miles on them. The pitch stop mount, stock, got about 30,000 miles on it, as well as any of our rear diff inserts. We've got nothing. So it's all the factory stuff back there, with the same amount of mileage on it. So the only mount we have on the car that's going to generate any real noise is going to be our billet aluminum solid transmission mount. So I would say there's nothing left to do than to fire it up, see how good it is or it isn't, and then at the end of the day, would I recommend a mount like this for you, especially for the price? Let's do it. gang, a swing and a miss this time. I will tell you, I do feel like I need at least just a little bit better weather in order to start doing better with the car. I ended up making 3 hits, and all of those 60 foots were 197, 198, and 199 in that order. So the car isn't technically getting any faster. In fact, it just seems to be getting slower due to the humidity that's out today. As far as the 8th mile, we were pretty consistent on cracking through 8.85 and 8.86, which is exactly where I would expect this car to be, once again, given the weather. As my final thoughts, I do believe that that solid transmission mount is going to do something, and if I can catch myself a nice 70-degree morning or afternoon, you better believe I'm going to be out here doing that again, because the car just feels so much more solid. In between shifts, there's no more of that slamming or banging that I can feel the transmission doing, and at the end of the day, I do believe that a modification like this is going to up your performance. You just need to kind of set yourself up for success when it comes to weather. For the final time, is it worth doing something like this? For me, it is. I love my car to feel like a race car, and although it is louder inside the cabin, I feel like the car is just much more responsive, and I like that out of a vehicle, but I am a race car guy. If you, on the other hand, are just looking to potentially save a little money by buying the less expensive transmission mount, I will tell you there is going to be a considerable amount of in-cabin noise. Anything from, like I was saying, the starter, the gear whine, you can hear everything kind of revving up, revving down. It's certainly a feel, but is that feel for you? That's your decision at the end of the day. I love it. Once again, drive in somebody's car who may have it, and it might sway you one way or the other. Even if you don't decide to do what I did, keep in mind that Import Image Racing sells all kinds of transmission mounts, not just solid mounts. Like I had mentioned before, you can get all sorts of poly mounts or the SPT mount. Just type in transmission mount and your car into the search bar, and you will find anything and everything you'd be looking to modify your Subaru. That pretty much wraps it up. So for thousands of parts, just like everything you saw on the car today, plus tons more, be sure to hit up importimageracing.com for all the best deals on the web and in the world. And gang, we'll catch you on the next one.